I just want to know, Stephen Holder joins us from The Athletic right now. Stephen, did you wake up feeling dangerous this morning?
Oh, I mean, always. That's just by default.
Where are you at on the Baker Mayfield thing? You've been covering the National Football League for a long time, and look, there's some nice games. He did some cool things last year, but let's just slow our roll till we get a whole season and a couple of accomplishments, right?
Well, I would agree with that. I think that I want to see more. And look, I think he's a real deal, and he's supremely talented. I mean, there's no question. Like, there's talent there that is very, very obvious. But just the Browns in general, I think, I want to see more. And I'm not ready to crown them anything. I don't know. I just think that it's really hard, I think, to excel when everybody's looking at you, when you're under that microscope, and they're going to be now, right? I mean, last year it was, oh my God, look at the Browns. How about that? And now that's not going to be the case. Now the case is very different. It's like, okay, maybe these guys are for real, and people are going to be gunning for them, right? So teams are going to come at them differently. They're going to scheme them differently. So I think it's going to be different for Cleveland this year. But I love Baker, and I think he's a real deal. But again, I want to see more, and I just think we'll have to kind of let that play out a little bit more, at least for me.
You get a first-year head coach, Freddie Kitchens. You got a dysfunctional owner.
Joe's favorite wide receiver.
You've got Odell Beckham. You've got what is some of the things he's been doing here lately? He's gotten a little bit even more weird than when he was in New York. Yeah,
so like I said, I mean, there's a lot of ingredients there, and they all got to work together, and that's all I'm saying, So I want to see how all of this plays out, and all those personalities, kind of have to coexist, and they, as a coaching staff and organization, have to manage all of that. Okay, which is a task unto itself sometimes, right? I will say this about Baker Mayfield: I think a lot of us kind of wondered whether he would be one of those personalities they had to manage, but as it's turned out, he seems like he's a hell of a team player. And he seems like he's a guy who just kind of wants to win. So I give him a lot of credit for that. He really does seem like he just kind of wants to fall in line and be one of the guys. And he's done a good job of, I think, endearing himself to his teammates. That was kind of one of the questions about him coming out. Was he going to be a me guy, right? We have not seen that at all. That is not Baker Mayfield. So I think he's got every opportunity to be great, but you got to do it, man. You know what I mean? We've made that mistake before with players, who we thought were going to be something and then ended up not being what we envisioned. But I don't think that's going to be the case here. I'm just saying the jury's going to remain out until you do it consistently. So that goes for Baker, that goes for the Browns as well.
So what do you make of the Colts and, not only a team to watch this year, but over the next three, maybe the best team and one to watch? I think ESPN, right, came out with that one.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that. Yeah, listen, I talked about this with Jamie a little bit. I think that's a very legitimate, point to make, and I buy it. And here's why: because they're constructed the right way. All right, look at this roster, the Colts roster. If you look across the board, there are a lot of their best players. They're young players. Okay, Quentin Nelson's like 23 years old. Darius Leonard, 23 years old. And then you have a situation where you have a stable situation at quarterback, right? You've got a defense that's emerging, right? And I think has talent at every level. Not necessarily individual stars on that defense outside of Leonard, but I think definitely has solid depth at every level of that defense. I mean, that is how you do it in the NFL, right? You do it with defense, playmaking defense, and getting off the field. And certainly on offense, they've got some balance, but, they can score points, and they're really good up front. I mean, they've got the ingredients, I think. So, and then you throw in the coaching, right? And Frank Reich is at the cutting edge. I think he's going to be one of the trendsetters in the league, as opposed to a guy who's trying to catch up to everybody else, right? So just with his offensive philosophy and things of that nature. So they have a really good situation, and I just think that with what they have, the future for them is as bright as anybody else. I mean, there's some other teams now. I mean, Kansas City is one, certainly, and there's a couple others, but I would argue the Colts have potentially the best construction in terms of their roster. The way their roster is constructed, I think I take their roster maybe over everybody else's right now.
Stephen Holder of The Athletic joining us here on the Fan Morning Show with Jeff and Big Joe. We've heard Eric Ebron say he wants to break all of Rob Gronkowski's records this year as a tight end in receiving and touchdowns. We've heard Darius Leonard now say that all he's looking to do is make 200 tackles, have 10 sacks, and become the MVP of the league. Look, we all have great expectations and we have little things that we want to accomplish, but where do you think those guys end up at the end of this year, especially on defense with Darius Leonard? He's got some help now this year.
He does, and well, let me take Ebron first because I have thoughts on that. So I love Eric, and that was fun last year, right? Watching what he did and his enthusiasm and all of that, and I think he's got a chance to have a lot of success again in 2019. I don't think he's breaking Gronkowski's record, and here's why: because last year was a perfect storm for him, and he does not have a perfect storm again this year. All right, so you got Devin Funchess in the picture now, so that's for one. So when you talk about the red zone, now there's another threat down there in the red zone. I'm not saying Devin Funchess is going to be a Pro Bowler, but what I'd say is that Eric Ebron last year was really their only consistent go-to guy in the red zone. And when they got down inside the 20-yard line, or at least more so, inside the 10 or 15, you knew where the ball was going. Everybody knew. They just couldn't stop him, right? I mean, it was kind of like throwing the ball into the post to Shaq. It was like, all right, they're going to run the post to Shaq. They're going to throw it down low. He's going to dunk on somebody, right? I mean, it's just what they did. And that's kind of how it went because they had a matchup, right? They had a favorable matchup, and they exploited it. And Ebron and, T.Y. Hilton, great as he may be, T.Y. Hilton is not a go-to guy in the red zone. I mean, he's 5'9", okay? That's the reality, right? So I think that this year that will change. I mean, Jack Doyle is back, right? Jack Doyle is a matchup in the red zone, right? We've seen Jack Doyle catch his share of fades and that kind of thing down in the red zone. Devin Funchess, that's why he's here, basically, because he's a possession receiver, gives them matchups, 6'4", right? So, I mean, they're going to have some favorable matchups with him. So, Ebron's not the only game in town anymore. Okay? It's just a fact. So, I think it's going to be very interesting, to see how it all plays out. I would be stunned if he had a statistical year comparable to last year. I just think for Ebron, last year was a perfect storm. For Darius Leonard, and that's not, by the way, to suggest that is not to suggest that Ebron is going to have sort of an average year or he won't be good. I'm just saying I don't see 13 touchdown catches. Okay. Now, as for Darius Leonard, I just think this guy, well, he's going to make plays because that's just who he is. The one thing I'd say about Darius is the way this defense works is that weak side linebacker, they put that player in position to make plays. That is kind of how the scheme is supposed to work. It's almost like it's not necessarily funneled to him, but that player is always going to be in the mix on just about every play. So that's how it's supposed to work. So he's going to have numbers, I think, just by virtue of the scheme and Darius, being the player that he is. So he's going to have his numbers. He's going to have tons of tackles. I do think there are other guys out there who can make a lot of plays, but I think the defense has a chance to be better, but I don't think Darius' numbers are going to fall off a whole lot. I'm not saying he's going to lead the NFL in tackles again, because, I mean, that's hard. But he's going to make a lot of plays just because of the way that position is utilized in their scheme.
So, Stephen, you said on something. You hit on something just a moment ago. I want to check in. It's been more than a month since we've seen the team. Do you have any kind of health rehabilitation update on Jack Doyle?
Jack Doyle's supposed to be ready to go. The expectation, from what I've been told, is that he would be cleared for training camp. So, Jack Doyle was doing quite a bit of running and cutting and doing just about everything toward the end of the off season when they were in the veteran mini camp. So I don't expect a lot of limitations on Jack Doyle next week. I think he should be ready to go. Now, he may have a pitch count and they may be conservative with how much they use him, but he should be ready to go and able to practice. Look, these things are always hard to project, right? And what's happening this week is the injured guys are coming back early and getting checked out by the doctors. So the updates, it's hard to give updates until they do that. Some of that's happening actually right now as we speak this week. But without the benefit of knowing what happened in that, checkup on Jack Doyle, the projection was that he was supposed to be ready to go. So I don't have any real concerns about Jack Doyle. I don't have real concerns about anybody, any of the key players, really. I think they're in really good shape. I mean, a lot of guys miss a lot of time in the offseason, but I think that was really just an abundance of caution. And I include Andrew Luck in that number as well. So, I mean, that was annoying, clearly, having him miss, damn near a month with that ankle, but no one seems to have any concerns about any of the core players going into the regular season. They're in pretty good shape.
All right, so if injuries aren't a concern to you, what is your number one story as they hit the field next week for the very first practice? What's the main thing you're looking at?
Yeah, they've got I think it's continued improvement. I mean, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse, is what I've heard. So they got to continue to get better, and I think that's what happened last year. You saw all those young players. The reason the team got better over the course of the season last year is the players got better. I think from week 1 to 17, you saw consistent progression from a lot of those young players. Can those coaches this year, can they continue to pull that out of them? Because the challenge is greater. Okay, the mountain is taller. To use Frank Reich's terminology, right? The mountain climbing, stuff. He loves his cliches. So they're now. I talked earlier about the Browns being a team that people are gunning for. Well, guess what? They're gunning for the Colts too, right? And they're not going to be, the little team that could. They have what looks like potentially a tougher schedule. I know that's always hard to project because we never know who teams really are, but it looks like a challenging schedule or more challenging. They have certainly they've got to open up on the road 2 weeks in a row. I mean, they've had some challenges ahead of them, and they can't come out of the gate sputtering like they did. I think getting that good start is going to be a key. They got to give themselves some rope for later in the season, right? And not put themselves behind the eight ball like they did last year. So I would say the key for me is they've got to continue to pull this development out of these young guys because that's who they're leaning on, okay? If these young guys don't continue to get better, the Colts won't get better because that's basically what it's dependent on. And then, as I said just a minute ago, they can't come out of the gate and stumble like they did last year. They're going to have a hard time achieving their goals. I mean, the goal is not just to squeeze in the wild card this year. They're trying to win the division. They're trying to make some noise, and you got to start strong to do that.
Stephen, always good to talk to you. What are we looking for on the website right now at The Athletic?
Well, I'm just